It's not, a total cakewalk. There is a cost to good things, like free speech, like having a society where it's equal opportunity, because that means it's not always going to be that everybody wins in the exact same way.
Everyone should have this. Salomé Sibonex.
Yeah, perfect.
Was that good?
Yeah, that's it.
That's my guess, Salomé Sibonex.
Awesome.
It sounds so good.
Oh, thank you.
Bart Baggett here, interviewing Salomé Sibonex.
Oh, wow. We're really going with the alliteration.
I think
both of us.
alliteration's the way to go.
Yeah, no, I rely on it.
But it's your real name.
Yes.
And mine is also Bart Baggett.
Nice.
It wasn't when I was 7.
Oh.
They called me Fart. Bart the Fart.
Yeah, I get salami.
See, kids are mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are not kids; those are adults still. So.
You don't read comments on your Instagram post.
I try not to.
It's really Instagram's fine. It's the YouTube channel when it hits 500,000. You just can't.
It's a sport at that point.
It's a sport.
Yeah.
Punishing people that try and be creative.
Yeah.
I did a video. Maybe 9 years ago on Donald Trump and his handwriting, and I was very intentional of not being political and not being right or left. And what's so interesting is 50% of the audience hates it, 50% loves it, but of those 50%, it's exactly different reasons.
Oh.
If they liked Trump, they liked everything I said about him and hated everything I said that is negative about him. And so it was literally like this mismatch, and there was no facts whatsoever. They misinterpreted everything I said about him, and it was all because their beliefs were getting in the way of any actual statements being made. And this was before he was even elected, so you can imagine. So I was very unbiased. I'm like, well, this is a crazy guy running for president. Let's find out what happens. You are interesting because when I reviewed your Instagram, I felt like you and I had one big thing in common, is we love free speech and we love freedom.
Yeah.
And when we don't get it, we get pissed off.
That's right.
And that's motivated you to make some pretty interesting choices.
Yeah, definitely. It has guided my life at this point. I had to overcome a lot of self-censorship when I was younger, and I think that it's something that young people have to navigate a lot now. This culture that's really hypersensitive, hypercritical, a lot of bad faith attacks against people where we're not really trying to get to the truth of something or understand the other person's perspective. We're trying to dunk on them. We're trying to dismiss them without ever giving any chance that they might have a reason for their perspective. And so that was really difficult for me, because if you enter into that arena where you're going to say what you actually think and question things and be genuine, you are going to get attacked. You're going to get caught in the crosshairs of people that view that as a threat, because I think that free expression and free speech is a tool to get to the truth. And if people are more concerned with maintaining their narratives or protecting their ego, that's a threat. So that was really hard for me to overcome that kind of punishing culture. But once I did, and once I realized that honest expression, genuine connection is the way that you become yourself. It's how you start to define yourself, and it's how you explore the world in the most authentic and interesting way. It's kind of addicting after that.
You mentioned this, you're so young.
Oh,
like you're saying, I went through all this phase of the 70s. Oh, yeah, I wasn't done in the 70s. Oh, in the 80s. I wasn't born in the 80s. When you say that, you're talking about your family was oppressing you?
No.
Like, where did this start? And then all of a sudden now you're at this place where you're an activist and you're starting organizations and you're doing art. To summarize your career, like you're an artist, I think is your primary vocation, if I'm correct. What is this thing that you did when you were young that you had to overcome?
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't really my family. It was more my peers. So the culture that my peers were a part of. So that cohort, when I was in my early 20s, like 20, 21, 23, when a lot of the stuff that we see on the mainstream now, cancel culture, the idea that if you're a certain race or a certain sex, you shouldn't be able to speak on topics because, you're a white person, so you can't speak on ideas like affirmative action because it doesn't impact you in the same way, so you shouldn't have an opinion on it. So this idea that we can dismiss people based on their group markers.
What were you doing that you had all this backlash?
I was avoiding that backlash for a while. So really what I would do is just kind of adopt the ideas that felt like they were safe to adopt.
You mean in your peer group? You just wouldn't speak up.
Exactly.
You're not talking about an art gallery where you had like a piss on Jesus painting or something. You weren't trying to make that kind of statement.
No.
You're trying to navigate your friend group in Miami, is that right?
Yeah,
So you're in Miami. I can't tell if you're Latino, not Latino. Are you allowed to have an opinion on the Latino Cuban culture?
Yes, I am technically allowed. I'm Cuban American.
Is like you get 1%, then you can have an opinion?
Yeah.
What's the percentage of blood for you to have an opinion on the Cuban American situation?
Yeah, you'll have to defer to the PhDs for that one, because in my opinion, there is no percentage of blood that allows you to have an opinion on something. If you have blood, you're allowed to have an opinion, in my view. But yeah, it's definitely not the Miami culture. This is more like the online space. I was on Tumblr. I was on social media. I was, interacting with these ideas before they broke out onto the mainstream. A lot of the ideas that we see now, that speech is violence and that words can do harm and things like this, those things were boiling up on social media sites like Tumblr before they were out on the mainstream. And so I was there. I was a creative person. I wanted to share ideas. I was interested in writing, but it felt like if I was going to share these things and they didn't follow this framework, this narrative, they were going to be met with hostility.
And they were.
Yeah. At that point, I was watching the thing we call cancel culture now happen, but I was seeing it before it had a name. So all I saw was people getting attacked and maligned for well-meaning questions, for pretty normal differences of opinions.
So someone would ask a Socratic question. Hey, why is it bad for affirmative action? Or why can't a white comedian make a black joke?
Yes.
You were asking those questions, and just by asking the question, they were getting attacked.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's pretty, I know that sounds typical now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think asking the question is really important.
Absolutely.
In most cultures, especially cultures that have a dictator, that have the free press, or early Nazi, if you were even to ask why, I know a lot of those people, well, you can't ask why, it's just faith. But why? Well, no, you can't ask that question. If you ask that question, it means you're not a believer.
Exactly.
If you're not a believer, you burn in hell.
Yeah.
What religion did you grow up with, and does that infuse this idea of free speech?
No, my religious background is kind of mixed and interesting. I guess it started with a mix of Catholicism and Santeria, which is a folkloric Cuban religion, kind of like voodoo.
Like Day of the Dead, Muerte, or something more like voodoo?
Yeah, similar to...
Because the Day of the Dead's a great holiday.
It is a great holiday.
Have you ever been to the Hollywood Cemetery on the Day of the Dead?
No, but I've been there, but not on the Day of the Dead.
You really need to go do that.
Very cool.
They decorate all of the little plots, and they have these seances, and I'm not sure if anyone believes it, but it's like Halloween.
Yeah,
they
for sure.
completely get into it. And I actually like the idea of honoring Dia Muerte, the dead.
Yes.
I like that idea
because
people just kind of forget about people that pass along, and they put pictures up, and it's a beautiful culture. Culturally, I like it. Religious-wise, I'm not a big believer in certain things.
Yeah.
Is that what you did? You said, well, here's what I grew up with, but here's truth, and then here's kind of how I'm going to live my life?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because I overlook that part of my life where I was like, I guess that was going to be 16, 17, 15, and it was when the first questioning that I did was religion. My family was not devoutly religious, but they would go to church on Sundays, and I did have also that more unusual religious background, which is the Santeria, which is a lot more of I guess like not mainstream,
Voodoo.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. So it's like you have these little altars, you have these different deities, and so I would see that in my family, and it was that first instinct to question, like, was that really real? Like, does that really work?
Did you ever try to punish an ex-boyfriend through voodoo?
I will not commit to claiming that publicly. I will leave that up.
I had an ex-girlfriend who wanted to kill her husband, and she, not the current husband, but the previous husband. And so she ordered the voodoo kit offline.
That's so funny.
And she stabbed it, and she's like, that stuff doesn't work. How do you know it doesn't work? Well, he's not dead.
No.
And, that was my first clue. She might be evil.
Right, yeah.
I mean, there was
attempted murder in the spirit realm.
Can you murder someone in the spirit realm? That's not really a thing, is it?
I'm not the expert to ask on that one. I think you can probably do damage, but again, as a skeptic...
Oh, you're a skeptic now?
Yeah, no,
I'm not
you were
religious. A voodoo practitioner.
No.
You know what? This interview's over. I thought you got the voodoo practitioner.
Sorry, I'm not that interesting.
We need to get... No, but you do art. And so one of the
Yeah.
reasons I thought you would be a great guest is your Instagram is polarizing. And Instagram, and just tell us the Instagram handle so we don't have
It's
to
my
wait.
name, so Salomé Sibonex or just at Salomé Sibonex. And that's for Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, whatever else.
Awesome. And so what I found interesting, it was offensive and funny, and you had like little memes, but you also had photographs, you had some artwork, but it was, if anything, it was compelling.
Thank you.
Which means that you stop and you listen. And I don't know that people will like it, but it will make them
That's
think.
the point. Yeah, that's the point.
Right. And as a comedian, I tend to lean more towards your style.
Yeah.
I want to make them think. I want to make them go, and so sometimes I know that I know where some people get a few more laughs than me, but I get this.
Yeah.
And they lean in,
Yes.
and they're like, "Oh, thank God, okay." So, but it's interesting because they go on a roller coaster. Because I'm kind of borderline offensive
Right.
and borderline this, and I talk about Jeffrey Dahmer and
Yeah.
Epstein and things that are kind of off the table for normal conversations. And to me, that's more interesting than just, okay, two guys walk into a bar, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And by the way, most comics working there are just terrific. There's no criticism at all on that. But I tend to push that edge a little
Yeah.
bit. And I think you do too. When you say your art, are you a painter? Are you a lyricist? Are you an author? How do you consider yourself an artist?
Yeah, I would consider myself a multi-disciplinary artist because I don't really feel beholden to any one medium, though I primarily work with writing. So that would be narrative, nonfiction, also poetry, but I do work with photography and sometimes with visual mediums like paint and ink.
And in all that, there's a reoccurring theme of anti-socialism, anti-authoritarianism, and freedom. I guess that would be the
Yes.
word. You're moving toward freedom away from prison.
Yes. Oh, and this is so integral to art because to make good art, you have to be a free person because you have to be willing to do exactly what you just said, which is go to the boundaries, to be unafraid to look under that rock or to push this limit or to see what this uncomfortable idea looks like on paper. And so that process of being vulnerable, being willing to dig into myself and say, what actually makes me uncomfortable to express? Because that's what I want to express. It's
Wow.
a process of growth, and then it's something that you share in the art that other people can then say, that feels right. And I get that all the time where people tell me, I didn't know what it was that I was feeling, but you put words to it, and now I understand. That's exactly what it is. And
Wow,
that's just the best compliment.
That's kind of like, I think, what someone would feel like if they have a hit song.
Yeah.
And they're like, I listened to it over and over, got me through a heartbreak. I've never written music, but I feel like that kind of expression and
Right.
vulnerability. I think Taylor Swift did it. Taylor
Yeah.
Swift really was vulnerable, and she talked about relationships, and it hit a chord to millions of people because she was being authentic.
Yes.
And that to me is a great way to express art. Do you feel that in your art you have to go to that place to find the breakthrough, or can you also just be funny, clever, or witty, or
Playful.
enlightened?
You can just be playful.
Playful doesn't have to be sad or from a broken place.
Yeah, play is freedom to me because you can't be playful if you're afraid. So it doesn't have to come from this kind of dark side of what am I hiding within myself? Where's my pain? It can also be what's fun for me, what feels like play. And if I do that with writing, if I do that with art, that's usually some of the best stuff that I create because it's totally free. It's entertaining to me, it's rewarding to me, it's engaging to me, and then it ends up translating to other people. And I mean, that's the same example for music, like music that other people want to dance to, it's play for the artist that created it. They were enjoying it while they created it, and now other people can enjoy it in the same way because it's free to play and it's an invitation to play.
One of the words I saw a lot on Instagram was the word fear. And I have written many books, and I've always perceived myself as someone that through words and through psychology, we can free ourselves from these mental cages that we have put ourselves in, and or our parents put us in, or the ex-boyfriend or the ex-husband. There's this mental, and of course politically you can talk about the systems, but even within a Western household with lots of, quote, freedom, people aren't free. If you're born and got into the marriage because your parents said you're not free. You've got a kid with the ex-husband, you're not free. You can't wear that, you can't say that, you can't date that, you can't date her, him, she, them. You're not allowed to in that family structure. So it's interesting, I have always had a kind of a bucket list of things I was afraid of. And then I'm like, if I'm afraid of it, I want to do it. So I've skydived. I ride motorcycles. I've done stand-up comedy. I've been in movies. Like these things that I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know if I could ever do it, but I was kind of afraid of it. You, however, took it to a new level. You said, I'm not just going to be afraid of it and check it off my list, and I struggle with it and privately have anxiety. You're like, I'm going to publicly just do the art and express how scared I was in the process. That's like a new level of brave to me.
Oh, that is such a compliment. Thank you so much. I mean, in the moment, it never feels that exciting. But as I look back and realize how afraid I often was to express the wrong idea, to be called whatever the ism of the day is.
Give me an example. What were you called? Racist? Were you called dumb?
Yeah.
You called?
I've been called privileged as a way to kind of dismiss.
You're privileged. You don't have an opinion because you're not poor.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't even know if you're poor.
Exactly.
They have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, my family comes from Cuba. So it's like, everything that we've done in some ways is from nothing. I mean, my grandma didn't have running water. She wasn't allowed to learn how to read. And
wow.
She came to this country. And so, things like this, like you're privileged. It's like, yeah, I am actually privileged because I live in the United States.
To Cuba,
yeah.
The way my grandmother was, but their version of it is, you got paid for your palm. You never worked a day in your life. You never got in dirty hands.
Yeah, there's always someone
insult.
worse off, so you should be dismissed. And so things like that. I mean, I've been called racist just for questioning ideas of, well, I don't think we should treat anyone differently based on their race. I don't think...
You would say that?
Yeah, I know. It's really extreme, right?
I think people should be judged by the character, the content of the character, not the color of their skin.
I know.
If you said that today, would you be racist?
Yes.
And you know that quote, obviously.
I mean, yes, exactly. We know.
And those of you that don't, I have a lot of fans in India, around the world, that's a very famous quote from Martin Luther King, who was then assassinated for his beliefs. And he was essential in creating this really wonderful rights movements, which was so needed, and 100 years too late, or let's call it 10,000 years too late. But that same phrase you would have been canceled for?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had pushback for that. I've had pushback for my criticism that the idea of privilege, that, we should rank people based on their immutable characteristics, that, as a Latina, I should be able to have more place at the table to speak than a white man, or as a woman I should have more say over a topic than a man. These kind of ideas where we're ranking people based on their immutable characteristics rather than actually listening to the individual and then ranking them based on whether their ideas are actually good or not. Things like this, they get dismissed as being naive or, again, privileged.
So for example, you're from Miami. If the city of Miami bought the Miami Dolphins and said, hey, it's a community team now, and there's going to be 25 seats at the table. Do you think I can get a seat because I'm a white guy that made money himself, or do I have to not have a seat at the table for the guy that just arrived? How are these critics of yours taking something so profitable and so successful as a franchise, as a private business, and saying, no, that's not fair. Only white men have football teams, which, by the way, I'm not arguing is not necessarily a good or bad thing, but it seems to be that very few women owners, etc. Is it that they're like, hey, everyone should have a seat at the table even if they're not qualified? Is that kind of what they're saying?
It's kind of a funny argument because it's like, I don't think women want to own sports teams or want to do that. Like, I have no interest in that. So, I mean, it's kind of the idea that you've seen in the Nordic countries where there ends up being a wider gender disparity, where women traditionally do want to go into these roles that are teaching and caretaking, despite that being a very equal society, because sometimes inequalities are actually natural. They're a reflection of our differences rather than something malicious that we have to, forcibly extract from society. So it's rather than creating a society where there's equality to pursue that which you individually are interested in, we're trying to do this top-down thing where, okay, there's not enough of XYZ person here, so we should forcibly insert them there.
Well,
Maybe they don't want to be there.
They tried that in Poland. They tried that in the Soviet Union. They tried that in Cuba.
Yes. Equality
means everyone gets the same portion.
Yeah.
But there's not any consideration of the capital and time it took to get that portion. And so if you're unfamiliar with the direction this conversation is going, clearly equality is not really the brass ring we should be looking for. Equal opportunity might be the brass ring. And one of the greatest things about the U.S. is even 200 years ago, they're like, hey, everyone has a right to be happy, but we're not promising you happiness.
Yeah.
You have a right to be prosperous, but it's not our job to make you prosperous. And what I did notice about immigrants, you were born here, right?
Yes.
And I've got many, many friends that are immigrants that did come later in life. they're such hard workers.
Yeah.
And they have a perspective, because one of them's from the Ukraine, and one of them's the Dominican Republic, and one of them is basically like, holy cow, nobody's watching me. No one's got a gun to my, I will do, and then people that are born here don't appreciate it necessarily.
Yeah, you're telling me.
You've noticed that too.
I mean, I had to grow up through that. I had that period in my life where I was completely ungrateful for the things that other people come to this country and value so deeply, like my family. And it can take one generation, because I was born here and my family didn't really give me an intense explanation of, hey, these are all the reasons why this country went wrong and why we left. They're just like, you're here, live, enjoy this, and go to school, have a good life. And so I had to actually learn that on my own, to realize, wait, things like free speech and freedom to pursue the life I want, and the ability to go after things that I want and to have the career I want, all of these things, I mean, running water, food that is plentiful everywhere. There are so many things that we can be amazingly grateful for, but if you are just in them all the time, it's like the fish that's not aware that they're in water kind of thing. And so when I finally went to Cuba and felt what it's like to be in a country where there is no opportunity, it is forcibly removed from the society, and you can feel the stagnation and you can feel the desperation in the people who, despite being very great, happy people and very resourceful, they're stripped of that
hope.
Yes, and it's so palpable. It's like having a bird locked in a cage, and you just see the desperation, and it's a dehumanizing situation to keep people in. And then I came back to the US, and it was just like, oh wow, this is precious. And that was, started to be the catalyst for me to really realize how many things we take for granted, like free speech, because we start to get spoiled, and we get uncomfortable with the challenges of free speech, right? Which is like, some people are going to say stuff you don't like. Yeah. It's not, a total cakewalk. There is a cost to good things, like free speech, like having a society where it's equal opportunity, because that means it's not always going to be that everybody wins in the exact same way.
Everyone should have the same exact car no matter what. One of the things I want to do before I let you go is I'm a handwriting analyst, and I noticed that your handwriting is interesting because, first of all, you press really hard on the paper. Like super hard.
Ooh, wow, you're calling it out.
Two things in common.
I'd love to know about that.
Serial killers write really, really heavy, and great lovers, because they're so passionate.
I'll leave it up to the audience to decide which one.
So what that is, it's passion, which means you get an emotion, anger or love, and it stays for a long, long time.
Amazing.
So that's passion, and that's the one thing. The other thing about, and those of you at home you can't see, it's mostly printing. Did you ever learn how to write cursive formally, or did they skip it because of your age?
I did learn. I do remember trying to learn in like elementary school, but after that it wasn't kept up. So I didn't really ever use cursive after middle school and beyond.
Yeah, and because what I'm looking at is the cursive is kind of sloppy, as if you haven't done it in a while, so I'm not judging
For sure, I didn't even know some letters.
But you're generally a printer. I think you have pride, you have self-respect, you get irritated when people don't respect you, which seems to be part of the motivation for you to start this fight. Because you weren't respected, you were disrespected, quote, dis, that's the root word of disrespected, right, disc. And then I think you have a need for independence and also selectively, which means if you're in a relationship, it's very, very selective before you have intimacy, and then you still are careful not to let too many close to you. And usually that's because someone got hurt, but also it's a little bit of independence. A lot of artists kind of like their alone time.
Yeah.
So you need to tell your significant other to give me some space. A couple days, not mean I don't love you. Let me have some space to breathe and to be a creative. And that's the high things I get from your handwriting. But I pronounce you in good mental health.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. You're very accurate. That's actually incredibly accurate. And I'm going to need some time to process.
Well, and I wish you had more cursive and how you learned it, because as more kids, I'm sorry, you're an adult.
Oh, no, by all means.
As more people that haven't written cursive, there's less and less data points to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Bart Show. We're here with, wait, see if I can get it right. Solome Sibonex. Oh.
I
so
like
close.
that, but not that. Yeah, no cigar. Salomé Sibonex.
Salomé Sibonex. You've been a fantastic guest. For them to find you again, Instagram, Yahoo, YouTube, Salomé Sibonex.
Yeah. My name on everything. It's my website. You can also find my newsletter from there, where I write about a lot of the topics.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I hope they go subscribe and like. You've been watching The Bart Show, the world's most interesting people, and I designate you. the world's most interesting people.
Why, thank you. I've been waiting for this moment.